Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. Good afternoon, Eric. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Josh?
Doing well. Jennifer, good to see you.
Good to
Jeff,
see
not to leave you out.
Sorry.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome.
Diana and TJ, can you hear us?
Yes.
Diana? We're waiting on a couple more. Can you hear us, Ashley?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good. Can you hear us, Mayor?
Yes, can you hear me?
Good.
All right, I'm gonna mute.
Are you there, Jason?
Yes.
Mayor? I believe we have everyone here and visible and audible.
And we're ready to begin?
Maybe Jennifer, do you have anyone down there? Okay.
Okay, I'm working on my screen. Everybody is super tiny and I can't see everyone. So give me a second.
Once I drop this slate, everybody will
Oh.
get bigger for you.
Okay, sorry.
You're fine.
Jason,
Sir.
Jason, once you drop the slate, then the mayor's on, right?
Yep. And as soon as you tell me we're ready, I'll drop the slate.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm ready. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Mason. Today is April 21st, 2020. It's our 4 o'clock special council meeting work session. We need to call this meeting to order with the roll call. Eric, please.
Sorry. One moment. Sorry. Councilmember Nelson,
Here.
Councilmember Chance,
Here.
Councilmember Bradburn,
Here.
Councilmember Stricula,
Here.
Vice Mayor Gilb,
Here.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Here.
Mayor Grossman.
Here. Vice Mayor Gilb, could you lead us in a prayer?
Yeah, I thought I would just open this afternoon with the serenity prayer. And it goes like, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's time for our city manager's report.
I am sorry, Mayor. I've got multiple devices on here trying to get everything organized. I thought it'd be useful, and I know we have limited time, but a couple of new things going on here for us, and I thought it might be helpful briefly to talk about how we got here. Council has a long-standing tradition of being very generous with visitor recognition during regular council meetings. Even though that's not an obligation, it's, you know, we recognize visitors at the beginning and the end of the regular meetings typically. At special meetings, we don't typically do that. Typically, and typically means pre-COVID-19. Typically, special meetings are a more streamlined agenda, usually a more relaxed setting where there's more of a dialogue. And although it may be hard to believe, you know, in the last, we've only had one regular meeting since the pandemic occurred, and that was just over a week ago. But we've had several special meetings in that interim, and it actually wasn't a month ago yet that due to COVID-19, the state legislature and the governor signed legislation that even allowed us to hold public meetings in this type of format. So we have been learning a lot of lessons in that process and holding these meetings via Zoom. At our last, so a week ago, we had a regular council meeting and we did not have recognition of visitors. That wasn't for lack of will, and it wasn't even really for lack of technology. The technology was around. It was more for lack of time and know-how on the city's part, as well as how to, we're different than a business and probably Zoom meetings that we may have in order to hold a public meeting and marry the technology with the requirements of holding a public meeting and allowing public input. We had to do some thinking. I do want to make sure and give a shout out to ICRC. Throughout all of our special meetings, our committee meetings, they have been just superb. And I know they are under a lot of increased demand for these type of things because we're not the only community. They have been a coach, have made themselves available. And not just during the meetings that are public here, we've chewed up some of their time behind the scenes in getting them to kind of walk us through and how we merge our Zoom meetings with their streaming in order to make the public access possible. So ICRC has been another component of that and deserves a lot of credit for what they've done. As this special meeting was put together, one of the items requested for the special meeting to be on the agenda was public input. We had several of the tools in place or knew what the tools were when the request was made. And over the weekend and up until today, we have been kind of fine tuning some of those pieces so that we are now in a format, and we will test this out that when we get to that point in the agenda, we'll be able to hear from public input in 2 different formats. And perhaps when we reach that point, council will allow me to maybe talk through some of the particulars of that so that our guests as well as our viewers know some of what we may need them to do to help make that happen. And also need to, and maybe Jeff will want to chime in here, in order to make that happen and kind of again marry the technology with the legal aspect as well as to provide broad participation. Council needs to be thinking about some parameters to place on that, specifically some time limits, both for individuals as well as for the group. I had set this out with the public notice using as kind of a draft, if you will, for 2 minutes per person and 60 minutes total. But it's certainly council's prerogative to modify that with with other rules or other parameters you may want to put in place. And then I should turn it over to Jeff, who may want to speak more particularly to some of those parameters. And as a reminder, both for council members as well as audience there, we are going to need to adjourn this meeting before 6:30. That is again because ICRC is doing this for many other communities and their capacity to support the streaming. Several other meetings were ahead of the queue for us into the evening, so we will need to adjourn in order to preserve the public meeting aspect. Jeff, any gaps you could fill in?
Well, as Eric pointed out, I guess I would just reiterate, it's actually fairly common at public meetings, even outside of this new Zoom world that we're in, that public comments have time limits. That's fairly common, and that's perfectly reasonable for council to implement. We've never done that in the past, so it takes some action by council to set what those parameters are. I would also note that as we have, as Eric mentioned, even over the weekend and into today, fine tuning the sort of technology of how this works, I would point out it doesn't really lend itself well to a back and forth kind of discussion dialogue, just because of the way this technology works. So council may want to consider also in those parameters, just if you want to give people a time limit, give them the time limit, allow them to speak, and then move on to the next speaker. That way it will also allow to give the most people as we can the opportunity to address council instead of engaging in a back and forth dialogue. That might be helpful. The last thing I would say is whatever the parameters are that council wants to implement, if you want to implement any at all, that would be appropriate to do by motion at the appropriate time.
Councilmember Chance?
Yeah, I would love, actually, I think it's appropriate. And I think, Eric, you mentioned that we haven't had public input in the last 4 or 5 meetings. So I'd like to move agenda item number 7 up to after number 4, after we hear from Mason Deerfield CDC. And then I would like to have public input because we have not heard from them in like 6 meetings, I think. So I'd like to make that motion.
Is there a second?
So second, I'll second that.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Councilmember Chance,
Yes.
Councilmember Bradburn,
Yes.
Councilmember Stricula,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gilb,
Yes.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Yes.
Mayor Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson.
Yes.
Okay. Keeping in mind, yes, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor. And then I'll end my comments. I would just sort of reiterate the statements I've been making at all of these meetings, just as a reminder to everyone. The only way this will work smoothly is if one person talks at a time. So if you could remember to mute yourself until you've been recognized and you have the floor and you can speak. That would be helpful. I would also point out one other thing. As Eric mentioned, there is a kind of a hard end time for this meeting. So as we approach that, it will be likely that someone will need to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. We've had a couple instances recently over the last few meetings of motions to adjourn, and I thought it might be helpful to kind of reiterate under Robert's rules how that works. And I will tell you, I may not have done it exactly right every time, but I've had the chance to look it up. I just would remind people, a motion to adjourn, you can make that anytime as long as you have the floor. In essence, that means you can't interrupt someone who already has been recognized and has the floor. If you have the floor, you can make a motion to adjourn. It needs a second. And if it gets a second, like last time, there is no discussion. It just proceeds immediately to a vote on the adjournment. That's all I have for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, so setting some rules, for lack of a better term, for the public input section. We've had the suggestion of 2 minutes per person, a 60-minute time limit. We know we have a hard stop today at 6:30, so we've moved public input up so that we can make sure that we get that in. I would like to suggest that council members take notes, and if time permits, at the end of the meeting during outstanding business, we can each take 5 minutes to respond to anything that may have come up during public input. Is there someone who would like to make a motion for any of those suggestions? Or if you have anything else, please let me know. Councilmember Chance.
Yeah, do we have a number of participants that we know? Can we tell that anyone that's queued into the website, or do we have because if there's one person and we're giving it, 2 minutes, I don't know if that's necessary, but if there's a bunch of people, then obviously we need to address that. But I don't know if we have that ability to check or not.
An imperfect ability. And Jennifer, do you have visitors down there?
I do not have any visitors in council chambers.
Okay. Then it appears that there are about 14 what we'll call attendees at this point.
So real quick, as our plan, as Mayor, you just pointed out, we are going to give them 2 minutes to ask a question and then just float through the questions and take notes? Or we're going to be able to go back and forth if there's a direct question or a direct we're going to be able to answer. So if someone asks me a question, we're going to be able to answer, and that encompasses that 2 minutes, or is that above and beyond the 2 minutes? The 2 minutes is just for the question, or is it just for the entire topic or the entire question?
As Mr. Forbes was explaining, this format does not lend itself well to back and forth. And if we engage in a back and forth, even if it did work well, we would suck up the time for others to have their time to express their concerns or questions to council. So we should handle it today, I think, like they do with the Mason School Board, and not engage with the visitors that come in, allow them to speak. And we will have to take into account, even though there might be a 2-minute cap per person, there might be some transition time between people. So we'll have to have some patience there. And what I would do is encourage council, take notes of things you'd like to address. And at the end of the meeting, when we get to item 8, outstanding business, you can each have the floor we can start with 5 minutes. If we need to add more, that's also fine, depending on how long it takes us to get through the rest of our business. Does that make more sense?
I don't find it unreasonable, Mayor.
Okay. So to review, we'll do, Vice Mayor.
If I could unmute for a second. So I certainly want to be sensitive to residents that want to come forward and talk to us, and that they don't feel like we've cut them off from doing so. And if we need to schedule a further meeting, understanding those rules, I think we should do that to give people a chance to talk and say what they want to say to us. So, just my thoughts.
Anyone else?
I agree with that.
Okay, so to review, we'll establish the format of 2 minutes per person with a 60-minute limit altogether. There will be no back and forth between council and the visitor. Council should take notes if you choose, and we will plan on 5 minutes per council member to respond during the item 8, outstanding business, at the end of the meeting, if time permits, because we know we have a 6:30 stop time today. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion along those lines.
Councilmember Bradburn?
I'll second.
Thank you. Shall we call the roll?
Councilmember Bradburn,
Yes.
Councilmember Stricula,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gill,
Yes.
Councilmember Hunterlaw,
Yes.
Mayor Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
Yes.
Councilmember Chance.
Yes.
Okay, item 4 on our agenda is the recognition of the Mason Deerfield CDC, or Community Development Corporation. Eric, were you able to cover all of your bases with your city manager's report while we're patching them in?
Yes, I was, and if you will give me one moment, I believe I can bring them into the meeting. I'm going to work on that now. So maybe
Okay.
I'm not going to make eye contact for a full minute here while I try and get this done.
Okay, stand by, everyone.
I believe we have Randy Kuven, Scott Jones, Sherry Taylor, and John Kramer. That should be in the meeting now. Maybe if we can just check their audio. Randy, I can see you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. John Kramer? You're on mute. Maybe while John works on that. John, can you?
Try putting it off and on.
Your mute isn't on, John, or it doesn't show it's on, but we can't hear you. Scott Jones? We can't hear you either. Sherry,
I'm here. Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Okay.
Maybe another try, Scott. We can see you. And John, anything from you?
They can probably call in and we'd be able to hear them.
I'm assuming there's something on their microphone or the volume on their device that's.
Eric, if I may, if they called in, they might have muted on their phone. Okay.
Mayor, Council, may I?
Yeah, Jason?
Yes. If you're having a small problem, it could be down at the bottom near your mute button. There's that little arrow caret. And my MacBook defaults to something that doesn't exist. So for select a microphone and select a speaker, that may be able to, especially if you have headphones, and you may have to select the headphones separately. And that would be you have to wiggle your mouse and then the mute button in the bottom left corner.
I think that all of us in this new format would be utterly panic stricken if we didn't have Jason from ICRC, and thank God for millennials. We know we're in good hands.
It appears that Scott, you were connecting to audio, but your mute is on now.
All right, is that better?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Scott, maybe tell us what you did and maybe John can follow suit.
Yeah, I had dialed in to participate by phone instead of doing the audio portion through the computer. So I went back and hung up the phone and then connected the audio through the computer.
Perhaps try without your headphones, John.
Can you hear me now?
John, yep.
Okay, sorry about that.
Good job, fellas.
Welcome. Okay, we are here to recognize our friends from the CDC, and we think you have something to share with us today. So we'll let you take the floor.
All right, I'm going to start. Thank you, Mayor and members of Mason City Council. Since we were approached by the city as a prospective partner these last few weeks in regards to providing small business relief support in the community, we've never wavered from that focus. And we really believe strongly that what you focus on, you achieve. And while there's a lot happening that could take our eye off the ball, we've really maintained our focus to provide support to the businesses that need it the most. So I know I can speak on behalf of all three of the gentlemen on the CDC Board of Directors with us today. We just want to thank council for the opportunity to respond to the ordinance that has authorized us to enter into a service agreement with City Manager Hanson to implement a gift card program to provide support to the businesses. So there was mention at the last council meeting that the CDC board would be in favor of a gift card program, and a letter was referenced to support that belief. The intent of that letter actually was to provide city leaders insights into program development, as well as give considerations to ensure that our business interests were actually appropriately considered and prioritized before anything was implemented. That letter was actually dated before the meeting of council on March 28th, where small business relief programs were discussed publicly for the first time. And that while that letter really touched on much more than gift cards, since it's what we're talking about today, we really felt it was important to stress the recommendations that were given to council just as a refresher around the gift card program specifically, which were, first one being, if a program is to be built around gift cards, the program should strive to ensure liability relief is built in through things like expiration dates. And then the major one being, we can't enable extremities on businesses once things get back to normal, I guess, quote unquote normal, right? Again, if gift cards, we really need to consider a redemption timing tier so that businesses aren't lopsided on cash flow versus product or workforce demand. Additionally, that letter was actually from the chamber leadership and not the CDC leadership. So we thought it was just important to add some context because the CDC was actually never approached about administering a gift card program. So when this legislation was drafted last week, it was the first we had heard about us being involved in a gift card program of any kind. So it took us a few days to determine a course of action. We spent the last couple of weeks prior to this past week, we had been working on the grant program at the city's request, and we had to pivot abruptly. We're all volunteers in addition to our highly demanding day jobs, so we appreciate the grace in coming up with a proposal in response to that ordinance and being in a position to talk with you all today. As we understand it, the legislation doesn't clearly define what a gift card program is. And since we were given no direction on how it should operate, we actually created a non-traditional program based on the language that was provided in the ordinance. And so hopefully all of you have received that. We sent kind of a high-level proposal to council yesterday. And the reason that we went the approach that we did with the program, what we are calling the Mason Loaves and Fishes program, is that we really believe that through all of this, we've identified a win for the businesses, a win for the community, and a win for the city. And the main reasons for that is that this program we created actually protects the businesses from a traditional gift card program where liabilities are enabled. And there was no plan on how those liabilities were actually going to be relieved in the current legislation. So if we were to go buy $160,000 in gift cards now and return them to the city where there's no plan for redemption, our fear is that it could lead to lopsided cash flow versus the product and workforce demand as earlier warned. So large liabilities on the books and no true understanding of the realized revenue timing could be extremely harmful for our businesses. And we just aren't willing to enable that. So we believe this program that we have actually enables the businesses to identify how and when they can relieve the liabilities by paying it forward to the community while injecting that needed cash into the businesses now. If any of you have any questions, we're happy to assist with all of you here and answer any questions that you have. But we really want to continue to stay focused on providing that immediate support to our small businesses without unintentionally harming them in the process. And we know that's not the intent of council. So we think this is a really great proposal to consider. So I'm not sure if anyone else from the CDC board wants to chime in, if I missed anything. But if not, thank you, Mayor and members of council. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you again.
Any questions for the CDC at this time? Councilmember Chance?
I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I did want to, you mentioned having to pivot very quickly. And I just want to commend you guys on not only have you pivoted very quickly, but you have provided, I think, very sound insight to, and I believe that having the heartbeat of what our community needs, what our businesses need, because what I keep hearing is that, one council member talked to one business owner, one council member talked to 2 business owners. Well, collectively, you talk to probably hundreds of business owners. So I just wanted to thank you for getting out, rolling up your sleeves, because what you mentioned is I know Scott has another job. I know John has another job, and I know you have another job. And for you guys to be able to put together the 2 plans that are extremely sound and taken in consideration our local businesses, I think you guys should be commended for that. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think we have a great option here because, you know, I was talking to someone the other day, and he was mentioning, you know, he has an auto business, and you know, he says, "Hey, man, great! You give me $2,000 in the month of April right now. I'll be able to pay my utilities. I'll be able to, you know, pay my guys, and that's good, and my rent or whatever it might be. But then here comes May, and I have $2,000 of people that want to redeem my services. So now, while I'm redeeming my services, I'm essentially working for free, and it is a huge liability. And so, thank you for pivoting and putting this thing into where, and I think what this addresses also, it gives our small businesses and our community the ability to give back. I mean, I think it's somewhat patronizing not to think that they would, because I mean, I know small businesses, and I know they're not looking for a handout. I know that for a fact. But what they need some help, and we need to address the help. And when, you know, I've mentioned this, I think back on the 28th or 30th, the delays in the bureaucracy of government have played out because we're looking at what, April 21st right now? So thank you guys. I mean, for doing all the hard work you have, doing, you know, giving us some very, very sound, I think, plans that address the need of our small businesses, opposed to what I heard in the finance committee meeting. It's still, I have no clue where that came from, but I'll ask those questions later. But again, just thank you guys for doing what you've done.
Mayor, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. Councilmember Nelson, excuse me.
Hi, I just want to say thank you as well. I think you guys stepping up to the plate for our community is just great. I think it's important to note, and it's important to get out there just because of some of the miscommunication from some of our other prior meetings, that you did not approach the city, that the city approached the CDC to do this program. And I want to commend you guys for how quickly you acted. You came up with a wonderful program that was ready to go. And in fact, as we had mentioned before, Troy took your concept and implemented it within 4 days. So thank you so much for helping our city, or trying to help our city. Don't give up on us, because I still have some ideas that I would like to definitely utilize you guys for. I think using the CDC is perfect. It helps free up our city's staff and our city's time to focus on city services. And again, you guys are pretty much the masters when it comes to the small businesses within our community. You talk to them on a normal basis. You know who they are. You know what they need. You're crucial to implementing any of these programs that we have. So hang in there with us, and thank you very much for your dedication.
Mr. Kramer.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Nelson and Chance, for those comments. We appreciate the recognition. What I also just want to quickly point out is there were some subtle differences with the most recent, to some concerns, or probably misrepresenting concerns or intent behind our previous proposal, our Pay It Forward program, because there was a belief, a misunderstanding, or if not an inaccurate representation of our proposal that assumed that any reference to seed money was intended to be used for operating purposes of the CDC. And that, as I think, as Councilmember Nelson pointed out, the intent behind this, it is not ever going to be intended to be used for operating funds for the CDC. Those dollars would be garnered through whatever administration fee that is assessed above and beyond the grant amount. Any dollars that we are awarded for any type of a grant program, 100% of those dollars are intended to be distributed to the businesses. Any dollars that would then be in the old pay it forward program that would have been returned to the CDC would never be used for operating purposes and would remain in a separate account to be redistributed for future purposes, with not a single dollar going to the CDC for operating purposes. So I wanted to be very clear about that. So part of what you'll see that's different in the loaves and fishes proposal is there is the full distribution of the dollars that would be awarded. And rather than dollars being recouped or returned back to the CDC for the same type of purpose, the return to the community would actually be in-kind contributions made by the recipients of the grants to other community organizations. So in that case, there is no opportunity for any recovery of granted dollars back to the CDC to be redistributed to the businesses. So I wanted to make sure that we were clear and that the record was straight, that the letter that was issued that was referenced in the previous meeting was not an evidence of a duplicity of intent or an ulterior motive. It was always intended that the seed money was seeding to fund the distribution of the dollars to the businesses. So if we could be clear about that going forward, I appreciate the additional consideration that the council is affording the CDC, and I'll take any other, or any one of us will take any other questions or comments related to that again. Thank you.
Before we go on to someone else, I'm going to take the liberty of responding to Mr. Kramer's comments. Thank you for the clarification. There has been a great deal of confusion in this fast-moving issue. And I want to reference something that goes back to the memo that we got yesterday, and something that's already been said in this meeting. Getting cash to our small businesses as quickly as possible has been our goal since Mason leadership requested that the MAID CDC develop a grant program to immediately help small businesses. I'd like to touch on that for a moment, and hopefully that will help others understand that there has been a great deal of confusion with the leadership. As the mayor, as a member of the Finance Committee and as the Economic Development Committee, I never approached the chamber about a grant program. And so it seemed like from the beginning, there was confusion on how this came about. And I don't know that we want to rehash all of that, but it has been very difficult to understand all of the intent or all of the plans. It has evolved quickly, and a lot of pressure has been put on council members to move quickly, and some were more comfortable taking extra time. So I appreciate your clarification, Mr. Kramer. And I also want to point out that I did misspeak and I said the word duplicity. That wasn't meant to be an insult, and I apologized right away. And then I apologized again profusely because I was sincerely sorry for misspeaking. But I hope that there is some grace that could be extended, since I know I did not make the approach to the CDC, and nor was I approached or included in that proposal to begin a grant program. Is there someone else who would like to speak? I think I saw Mr. Jones' hand up. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to address one point on the Mason Loaves and Fishes program. You know, when we received the ordinance that, you know, called for Mr. Hansen to engage the CDC with a service agreement to administer a gift card program, you know, there's no playbook for the chamber that we can go to and say, this is what a gift card program is. So we took that as intent to be creative, but still create a program that comports with the language of the ordinance. And it is our collective belief that what we've offered through the Mason Loaves and Fishes program does just that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought that one up too. I meant to mention that on the topic of confusion. There were so many references to the Hamilton program and doing it like Hamilton did, doing it as quickly as Hamilton did, that I believed that that was a topic of interest. And it came, I thought, from the gift card program that was instituted in Hamilton. So you're mentioning today that you did not realize a gift card program would be on the table or be offered to the CDC. So I'm hearing that for the first time as well. So, we're all doing our best here. We need to extend grace to one another. It's not easy to communicate through Zoom. It's not easy to have an open meeting through Zoom. And it certainly has not been easy to learn and gain understanding with a lot of the tension and the interruptions that have been occurring in some of our meetings. So I'm glad that things are calm now. Is there someone that would like to take the floor next? Vice Mayor Guild.
Thanks, Mayor. If I get off mute, and I can probably address the issue. So, I apologize. I was not able to participate in the first couple of meetings that you guys all had in terms of bringing a program together. And I wasn't able to come in until somewhat the end of that process. But the concern I think we have to address, and I don't know how to, I even see the same concern in the loaves and fishes program that you're now offering, in that we're using public dollars. And I think the public needs to understand that the concern that I have expressed, and it was expressed with 20/20/43, the way it was presented, and the way the Pay It Forward program was presented, was that we're using public dollars to purchase an asset, and yet there was no asset coming back to the city. Funds, as they came back, were going to go back into the CDC Pay It Forward fund, and I have a philosophical concern about, should we as a city give away $500,000 of our resources without retaining the right to receive that back? Because I think your program said it was going to be paid back, but it was going to be retained by the CDC, not given back to the city. The gift card program that we introduced last week indicated that we wanted to get $160,000 out into the community. And I appreciate your ability to identify who may have the greatest need for those funds. But again, it was requiring that those gift cards come back to the city so that the city had an identifiable resource that it had acquired with the public money that it used to acquire it. And we certainly could discuss what happens with those gift cards as they come back. That's probably a future discussion. I certainly don't want to be disruptive to small businesses, that want to create liabilities that they don't have. And I think we can manage that as a council in terms of what do we do with this resource now that we have it. But I think the concern is that, at least the concern I have, is that we don't use public resources that we just give away and don't get something back for the city. That's my concern. And I'll just express that. I don't know if the CDC has, anybody from the CDC has any comments on how to solve that issue.
Mr. Jones?
You're mute.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Sorry
Jones.
about that. Yeah. So taking the first point, so the original program, the Mason Pay It Forward program, the concept was that if a local business received a grant, okay, they were encouraged to repay that grant to a fund that would be administered by the CDC. It is not the CDC's money. It is a fund that exists separate from the CDC that would be used in future bad economic times to help small businesses. Okay, it's a way to keep continuing to pay it forward. As to the second point about,
I don't want to interrupt you, but if I could ask you, so as they're paying that back, why don't they pay that back to the city?
Well, if that's something that the city says, yes, you want to make the Pay It Forward program, the $500,000 contribution, and you want to encourage people to pay that back to the city, but not make it a legally binding obligation to do so, I think that's something we'd be interested in considering. But if you're asking us to create a loan program where, you know, you administer or you grant $500,000 to local small businesses and look at us to, you know, enforce the repayment obligations of the local small businesses, I don't think we can do that. So the concept of the Loaves and Fishes program was really to create an incentive for local small businesses to help each other. And we think that that spirit exists within the community. And, you know, there's either, legally speaking, there's either, if you buy a gift card, there's either an obligation to perform the services or not. And the problem becomes for small businesses, if they're holding on to a gift card for a year or 2 years that someone hasn't redeemed, they carry that liability on their books. Okay. And if that liability is big enough, it affects their ability to get financing. It affects their ability with respect to their loan covenants. So the Loaves and Fishes program was really an attempt to have a creative gift card program that allowed money to get quickly to small businesses and allowed small businesses to pay it forward to the other local businesses.
Vice Mayor, do you have some follow-up questions?
So, yeah, I certainly think that we as a council could address some of those issues. I mean, if a business comes to us and says, hey, I'm carrying $5,000 of gift card liability on my balance sheet and it's causing me some problems, that, you know, I think we could provide some relief to deal with that issue as it arose. But as I look around, not just Mason, now, you know, the state of Ohio, the whole nation, businesses are asking people to come in and buy gift cards from us so that we can get some cash today to survive, to pay our bills with. And I think that was the intent of the amendment on 43, was to infuse $160,000 of dollars into the community that people could grab onto and utilize today. And the resource that would be acquired from that, we as a council could decide to relieve it, to do something else with it. But it would be something that the council would have some input on. And I think it's important when we're talking about using public dollars that we have some input in terms of how those dollars are, how that resource is handled at the back end. So that's my only comment.
Councilmember Nelson.
Well, I think when you say, you know, giving the funds out to the small businesses and getting nothing in return, I mean, that's not accurate at all. If these businesses, if they're not here, these small businesses are no longer in our city. We no longer collect net profit tax from them. We no longer collect payroll taxes from them. And ultimately our property taxes go down. And so having these small businesses, even though they're not taking the dollar and giving it right back to the city, they're still, I mean, we need to keep these businesses in our city. We need to keep them viable. We need to help them so that they can reopen. And by them reopening, they do give back to the city in so many ways. Taxes, 88% of our tax revenue is collected from businesses. So I think it's almost insulting to say that they're not, you know, you're not going to get anything back and you're not giving anything back. And that's not the case. You know, I don't think gift cards, which I don't understand how Councilmember Honerlaw said that he totally didn't, he agreed with me and that he didn't agree with gift cards. And now all of a sudden he voted for gift cards. Gift cards are not helping them. You know, not only do they have them on a liability on their books, but then once they have to claim it as income, then they have to pay taxes on them. If we're going to be dispersing $160,000 out into the community, just give it as an economic incentive to them. Dealing with this whole gift card program, and it's costing the city more money than it would just to disperse that money to our small businesses.
Okay, I feel like we were making quite a pivot as well, because I'm recollecting, and I didn't go back and watch the first meeting that we had or the second meeting in its entirety recently, but it seemed like we were considering a gift card program. other big cities are using them for restaurants. I don't think Vice Mayor Guild meant that we were getting nothing in return. But the point is, when you use public funds, you typically use public funds to buy a service of some type or a good of some type. And it's difficult to gift public funds. Yes, we get net profit tax and payroll tax from these small businesses, but the ones that you've targeted are not a large percentage of the 88% of payroll taxes that we collect. We also collect payroll taxes from our residents and other larger companies. And I don't know if Eric can give us an idea of, if we were to add up all of those small businesses in the city of Mason, do we have a ballpark figure on what those targeted businesses might add up to as far as a percentage?
I'm going to rephrase what I think your question is. If we were to take smaller businesses, and again, the definition matters a lot here, but I could tell you.
The ones targeted in the proposals related to ordinance 43 in its original form. So fewer than 49 employees, brick and mortar.
It's probably easier to answer the question from the other direction. About, these are rough numbers, but about, let's say 1%, 2% of the total number of employers in the city of Mason. That's the broadest definition that we kind of have a population on. And that's not a perfect population, but of all the employers in the city of Mason, 1% approximately of those employers, and I don't have the data in front of me, but accounts for something on the order of 85% of the tax revenues. And then as you go down, you know, the larger number of employers account for a much smaller percentage of the total earnings tax collection. Now, but that's not to say that what any one tax, you know, every taxpayer pays the same, and to them it's the same percentage, and it is a, you know, it's a significant amount to any of those employers based on what they're bringing in. So it's a fair tax, but Mason is blessed by having some very large corporations that contribute heavily to the overall pie. That is absolutely true.
So to the point about the larger corporations, you know, we've always focused on them, and they're so important to the ecosystem of creating demand for the small businesses. So they're all very important to us. So we love them. We love each type and size of business in our ecosystem. I think we need to make it clear that all of us expressed a desire to be helpful with small businesses, but not all of us expressed a desire to go with the CDC's approach in the plan that was proposed to us initially. And I'd really like to get that out again. We've all expressed a desire to be helpful. I like the gift card program better. I like the idea of the city purchasing an asset and being flexible with these companies, setting guidelines so that we don't cause a great deal of stress or liability on them. We can stagger how they're used. And the beauty of it is we can give it to the public somehow. Perhaps we can resell them for a discount. Perhaps we can use them in other ways to bless the public, and that drives traffic into these establishments. In addition, I don't know if this would happen in our case, but I've heard percentages like 35 to 50% of gift cards get forgotten about and not used. So if we set expiration dates, perhaps that might occur. I don't know for sure, but we certainly don't want to create any hardship on our local businesses. And we also, well, I think that the gift card program, there may be a better way to make it more fair. People who want to participate in it can sign up for that, and that also provides some consumerism choice in that. And with the CDC's previous plan, you know, there was not a clear picture of how those funds would be distributed. And I know I heard council members commenting that with a $160,000 program, if we were to divide that amongst our 1,200 businesses, that would end up being like $130. But if we use that same mathematical formula with $500,000, it'd be a little over $400. So I'm not sure that even distribution was ever in the plan for the CDC to distribute the funds, but I really don't know. And I'm wondering if someone from the CDC can help with that. Mr. Kramer, are you able to address that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Grossman. So the document we provided council was an executive overview. So what we've actually done subsequent to that, we've already formulated an independent selection committee of local business leaders, none of whom would be eligible to participate in any kind of a grant or award program. That committee has met and has finalized and formalized the selection or awarding criteria, so that, as we mentioned initially, we would use the same methodology and apply it to all businesses equally, so that we could get a fair and equitable consideration as to who gets awarded the dollars, whatever those dollars may be. And this would be something independent of a gift card program, because obviously it's not an application process per se to be able to go and buy gift cards. It's probably more driven by, does your business offer them? But that is one of the criteria or one of the data points that we have as part of an application process for a grant program to discern what are the capabilities and the limitations that businesses have, because we think that is a valuable data point to have for any future reference. So there was a very specific methodology and criteria against which people could apply for the grants. There are specific and detailed data points that we're looking for that would then allow this independent selection committee to quickly be able to determine what is the total need of an individual or of the population in general, as also to determine what is the size of that universe of who are the businesses that are in need and how big is the need, and then quickly be able to turn around and award the grant money based on those criteria. Then the intent would be to be able to completely accumulate all the data as to who applied, how much did they ask for, and what was the dollar value of any grants awarded and to whom were they awarded. That way we have the backup information that's available also, so that we could present to council if they need it. Here is everybody who's received it, and then also be able to publicize that if needed, or whatever reference of that information you would need, to then understand who would be the businesses that received it that we would then look to receive in-kind or returning contributions back into this fund. As Scott noted, it is not a CDC fund. It is a separate dollar value that would not be utilized for anything other than a pool of dollars to be redistributed 100% back to the community in the event of another similar situation. But as Scott noted, if the need is for the city to be able to receive those funds directly so that it goes back into your coffers, that's obviously an element that could be considered. But it was also termed this way because we didn't, as Sherry indicated, it wasn't not the intent to create a loan program, that they felt that this was a loan. This was to be deemed a grant, and then we would look for them to make some kind of a in-kind contribution back to the community. But it wasn't an obligation that they would then need to track on their books, or like a gift card would be, that would be a service they'd have to deliver later. Does that help, Mayor Grossman?
It does. When you talked about the criteria and the data that you would be gathering, are those the criteria and data points that you mentioned in your executive summaries and memos that you gave us, or is there something additional?
No, those are the criteria that we referenced. Like I said, we'd already began moving forward with the selection committee that we also referenced in the Pay It Forward program. So both of those are in place as we speak.
So a couple of issues I had with the legislation and with the executive summaries, there didn't seem to be a requirement to demonstrate distress or a strong negative impact from the COVID-19 shutdown. And the selection committee was anonymous. And so that made me wonder how the funds would be divided up and if they could or would be divided up equally. And then connect that dot with some of the language in the petition that was circulated and some of the other things and things that I was hearing in the meetings. Perhaps I got confused, but it seemed as though there was a position made that if we did not act quickly and release this $500,000 grant to the CDC, that businesses would be lost and it would be our fault, and not the fault of the pandemic, but the fault of council for not releasing these funds. And I struggled with that. I struggled with that communication. I didn't think it was fair to council, and I didn't think it was, well, I didn't think it was true. I didn't think that because if council did not comply with this, that businesses would be lost and it would be our fault. It would be the fault of this tragedy and this horrible pandemic and these terrible economic circumstances. We certainly want to help. This entire experience has been difficult because it seemed to be communicated by some council members anyways, with some reinforcement from the chamber and CDC that if we did not do it this way, there was no other way and we had to rush. And it was unethical of us to even really think it through time and consider it. So that's been an area of frustration, and I think that's added to the confusion. And I know you're all seeing us in these little boxes, but we're human beings and we all think differently. We all feel differently. We all interpret things differently. And civility goes a long way when we're trying to learn and gain understanding together. So I appreciate the clarity that you've helped me understand, Mr. Kramer. Why don't we see if somebody else wants to hop in? Vice Mayor?
Certainly. Well, so while the CDC chambers here, certainly the federal CARES Act program is providing substantial relief that we could never hope to provide as a city. And I'm wondering if you could share with us what you have communicated to the small businesses in terms of reaching out and grabbing all of the benefits they can under that program. I understand the program has had some hiccups, but I do understand, as I reported to the Finance Committee, I did some checking. Ohio has received the 6th largest award of dollars out of that program. 38,000, more than 38,000 small businesses in Ohio have received awards under that program. Up to over $10 billion of funds have been appropriated for Ohio small businesses. And I certainly don't know, and I don't know if you know how many local small businesses have applied, have received that funding. That's providing certainly much more support than we could ever hope to provide. And I don't know if you have any comment of where the local businesses are in terms of that program. That would be useful information.
I'll ask Sherry if she wants to comment on that, because she's been in touch with some of them directly.
Yeah, so I can chime in, Vice Mayor Gill. So in response to the first question on what we're doing to generate awareness of program information, we've got an entire portal on our website full of business resources that we've been continually updating every single day, as this is an ever-changing process. I don't believe anyone in the region has a more comprehensive business overview than we do in regards to the ever-changing dynamics. I have heard a lot of our businesses are approved, and that's a really tricky word to use, because approved right now doesn't mean that you're going to get the funding. Because while I've talked to 10 businesses, let's just easy numbers, 10 businesses, all 10 being approved, one of them has found out that they're going to get funding and the other 9 have been informed that while they were approved, there's no funding available. And so with the next iteration of the CARES Act modifications, we don't know how that's going to shake out, because I don't know if you all are familiar, but the loophole that many businesses found in the CARES Act was that you could apply if you had between 1 and 49 employees at one location. So what you're seeing in the news around some of the major corporations that received substantial funding amounts is because all of their locations applied, and so they received substantial dollars, which pushed the smaller businesses who actually do have under 50 employees to the bottom of the list. And so we don't know how that's going to shake out. And even a month ago, the projected need against what Congress had approved was going to be nowhere near enough then. And even what the projections are, what they projected 3 weeks ago against what we know now that they're looking at for the next iteration is still not going to be enough. So there's a major fear factor and concern from our small businesses. The dialogue over the last month has gone from, okay, I'm trying to grasp what this pivot that I have to do to completely change my operations. I have to lay people off, to where they saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Whereas this week, the conversation is they're saying, what if I have to close my business permanently? And I understand one that I know of, one on Main Street that did this week that has decided they're going to close. So I think that there's a lot of uncertainty in the small businesses, and what our entire intent was to provide a stopgap funding while the CARES Act funding came through. This was never about like being the end all savior to the small businesses. This was to provide that immediate support to get them through critical needs infrastructure for the short term, so that when the long term solution, if you can even call it that, with the CARES Act approach, when that came in, that they were able to respond in a much stronger position. And I think it's important to note, because we keep talking about the gift card program in Hamilton, and I didn't want to go down this path, but since it's been brought up so many times, I think the clarity and understanding that program is that the city of Hamilton granted $300,000 to the HEDC with no intent of recouping those funds. So the city themselves. So the way that program was designed was they granted the funds to the HEDC, and then the HEDC and the chamber have an agreement to sell gift cards to the general public at any point that they deem appropriate over the span and increment value partner that they choose. But the businesses have no obligation to pay those funds back. So it's a completely different, the legislation that was provided to us was contradictory in nature, right? Because it pointed to the Hamilton program, but then didn't actually enable us to create the Hamilton program. So we literally have done nothing but respond to the information that we've been given and try to provide solutions consistently, because again, this is all about providing support to these businesses, however we can do that. So hopefully that adds some clarity around some of that, because I think there's been some misunderstanding of even what the Hamilton gift card program actually is.
Thanks. Vice Mayor Gill, are you following up? Mike, we missed all of that.
I'm sorry. Am I on now? Yeah.
You're
So,
on.
yeah. So, but if I could, am I on? Am I talking? Can you hear me? Perfect. Okay. All right. So I don't know if you know, so you're certainly in communication with small businesses. You've talked about the gap, the need. You know what that need is and what that gap is. Certainly we were trying to infuse $160,000 through the gift card program, but I have no idea to know what is the need out there with our small business community, and how do we even go about trying to solve that need and meet that need. So certainly the perspective that we're coming from is saying these are public dollars. How do we appropriately distribute them for a public purpose and retain a public benefit for those dollars? And that's what we're trying to do. So I would have been hopeful that that $160,000 gift card program was already distributed, already out helping people. And I'm disappointed to hear that it's not been, it's kind of still sitting on the table, waiting to be utilized. You know, from my perspective, it needs to already be out in the community, helping where it can be helpful. So I don't know if you have any response to that at all.
Mrs. Taylor?
Yeah, I think my only response to that again is that for the way that the legislation was written to give the gift cards back to the city without us having an idea. I mean, the city had no plan. You know, kind of what we've been scrutinized over on some of this is we've tried to be agile, right? Is that there was no plan for how those dollars were actually going to be spent back in the community. And so I think really making sure that whatever the redemption period or process is, we don't want to enable harmful activity on the small businesses. So that's, I mean, this has really been about us trying to find a win-win solution, not about trying to slow down the process. And once again, I think as we talked about before, we've been in development of a grant program approach, and the gift card piece was a new thing that came to us last Monday that we've been strategizing around how to approach that. But we are very much holistically looking at, we have a framework and a process to identify the need of the small businesses, and we're going to keep moving forward on that.
Thank you. That does help. Does that answer your questions, Vice Mayor? Okay, yeah, and I'll just say it again, confusion, moving quickly, and trying to understand how to make a plan and to be able to share ideas in an environment of civility and with enough time and space to think things through has been a challenge with this council. I think we've had a record-setting number of meetings in the past couple of weeks. And I know there is a desire to find solutions, and we can certainly work on a plan to execute with the chamber or the CDC, excuse me, on the gift card program. That isn't, I don't think that's impossible. We just need to sit down and talk about it. It's also not easy to have an introduced idea in an open session without collaboration behind the scenes. And in fairness to council members, that I don't even know who all approached the CDC about the original program. I know Councilmember Stricula was one, but most of us did not know what it was about, and we're trying to gain understanding. Councilmember Chance, you've had your hand up for a while. Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I've got a few different questions and then a few different statements, but yeah, confusion is a good word to use here, because every time, how we went through all this dialogue and how we started to try to understand these things, we started pointing at all these different municipalities that were doing something, right? And doing something fast. And Eric, Jeff, or Vice Mayor Gilb, you're the one that kept bringing it up. How many of these that I think we've talked 10, 12 different municipalities, definitely close to us and around us, used a form or fashion of someone like the CDC? Does anyone have that answer?
From my awareness, everyone that we've spoken of has used, that they're not all CDCs, but there's some similar equivalent or some pre-existing program, third-party entity. Likely because the issue Jeff and I spoke of, it's difficult for a city to do that on its own.
I get it. And then my other thing is, Mayor, you brought up, I personally take the blame for this. I mean, I 100% will take the blame for this, because this is when we were discussing a few things of, through all of this and understanding, talking about there was no preparation for these businesses. I don't understand why this council, 7 of us sitting here, including you, we're sitting here going, well, we got to take our time to figure this thing out. Man, the best thing that we could have done was presented to us on 3/28 or 3/30, one of those 2 dates. And we all sit here and know this. We know it. And we can tell by our finance committee meetings, and you're trying to defend a point that, man, I almost feel sorry for you guys, because we have it. Sherry or Randy Scott, John, answer me these questions. I think I jotted this down. So you guys, do you have a site fully baked? Because I've seen some people ask, where's this CDC site? Do you have a site fully baked
Yes.
for these loan applications?
Yes.
You have a site ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, and the applications on there ready to go?
Yes.
Is a selection committee ready to go?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that you guys would be able to accept applications starting tonight if we were to get off our hands and actually do something?
Yes.
And we could start dispersing funds within 48 hours, because it's going to take 48 hours to get through the underwriting requirements and selection committee to do what they have to do. Is that right?
It'll take longer than 48 hours just for collection. You know, we've got to give businesses ample time to apply and then evaluate, but quick turnaround process for sure.
What's today? Tuesday, or Friday might be doable?
But I mean,
okay.
Select depends, right? Selection committee contingent.
Yeah.
I think our original plan was, I think 5 days was what we had proposed in the initial. So
Yeah, it was originally intended to leave the application process open for 3 days and then take approximately 24 hours, maybe no more than 48 hours to
Okay.
make the decision immediately following that of who the awards would go to. And then at the end of that period, the CDC would then begin writing checks.
Excellent. All right, so that's we could have done that 3:30, so April 5th, that could have been done. And here's, and Vice Mayor Gill, you might confuse me the most. I want you to know that 6% of these funds inside this first PPP went to small business of 50 employees or less. And you called that wildly successful? Wildly successful. And secondly, to the CDC, this is in my mind too. For you guys to have to defend, to have a revolving fund program inside the city, I would encourage all of council, the mayor, the vice mayor, all of council to look up what revolving funds do and how they function, because it is a smart source of us to have. Because yeah, hey man, I'm going to sit here and I'll admit that we get a ton of money from big business. We 100%, and we do a really good job of taking care of them, and we should. It makes perfect sense. I'm a business guy. You take care of the people that feed you, but at the same time, no pun intended, but guess who feeds the small businesses? Those folks. And not only that, but guess who makes up our DNA of our city? The small businesses. So for me to just sit here, then kick the can down the road, and for the CDC, who has done an absolute spectacular job, and we just continue to do and have these same dialogues. So Mayor, if you want me to define what analysis paralysis is, you look at this city council. That's what we have. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like to our city. And somebody asked me to make an apology last time, and I'm going to make an apology right now. And I'm going to apologize to the small businesses, and I'm going to apologize to the citizens of Mason, because we are dysfunctional and we can't get anything done. So I apologize to them, because they are certainly doing an apology. So that's all. Thanks again, CDC. And hopefully we can get something done for the small businesses.
Councilmember Chance, took a couple of notes. You started out by saying that, and by the way, we need to get going to community input, so I'll make this quick. You said, I, Ashley Chance, personally take the blame, and then you blamed your council and your colleagues. You mentioned
just leave it on me. I'm part of the team. Leave it on me. I'm good with that. I'm 100% okay with it. So don't try to mix words. Don't try to spin my words. I'll take the 100%. I'll take the blame.
Drastic way that's not realistic. And I'm glad that you pointed out all the things that were in place by the CDC. And it's true, they've done an incredible amount of work. But there are a couple of things that I can assume from hearing that there was an assumption of agreement of all of council when the CDC began, or early on in the process, that just wasn't there, or at least a clear understanding of all of council. I'm not sure at what.
So you are saying duplicity again and deception. Is that what you're saying? Because I did not see it as soon as you saw it.
You talk about things that can get done, but you are habitually attacking your colleagues. If Vice Mayor Gelb is reporting on what we know about the CARES Act and how it's rolled out and what he's reading in the media, that's fine. I don't think it's responsible of any of us to discourage people from applying for those benefits. And I believe that was where he was coming from on that. We haven't heard from Councilmember Honorlaw or Councilmember Stricula, and we are getting close to the edge here. We haven't heard from Councilmember Bradburn either. Did any of you like to speak? Councilmember Bradburn, please.
Yes, you know, some of the discussion, the beginning of the discussion was about an economic sustainability fund. And there is money there. But in my discussions with the city manager and Joe Riegelsberger, that sustainability fund was for the sustaining city services. And we have to be very aware of the fact that we are going to have a downturn in revenues. We cannot depend on the state. The state's got a $2 billion rainy day fund. I don't think they're going to go ahead and divvy that out to the cities and the townships. So those funds come into the city. They come into the city to provide services. And those services are police, fire, streets, maintenance, parks, so on and so forth. And that is our core business. I want to be able to help small businesses where I can, but I have to be very cognizant of the fact that these are public funds brought in by everybody. And then we have to make sure that if we do go ahead and decide that this can act as a bridge loan, not a bridge, I said loan, I take it back, okay, as a bridge, then the question becomes the viability of the business. It goes ahead and says, hey, I'm in trouble, I need it. And are we going to end up providing funds for a business that really isn't that viable? Then is that not a misuse of city funds? So I guess it becomes the criteria of what is the evaluation process and the strength of the individual business. And I think as we look at this, and I feel sorry for the restaurants are going to get, based upon the current distancing, they're going to get creamed. If we're going to do 6 foot distancing, you know, it's like, well, take out every other table. What's the business model? You go ahead and you buy, lease, or rent smallest possible space you can, understandable. Pack in as many people as you can, revenue, turn those tables. The question is, after we get past some of this distancing, are people going to be comfortable with the demand? Will the demand be there? But the demand will always be there for public services. So then the next question becomes, after if we go ahead and expend whatever amount of money you want to say, what is our position when all of a sudden we can't go ahead and provide some of the services all of the residents have enjoyed? So I don't believe the statement paralysis to analysis is an appropriate statement when we're talking public funds. We have to have that analysis. Eric, I have a question to Eric, our city manager, if I can, in regards to this. Eric, have we begun or started furloughing of people and so on and so forth? Yes, we have. Okay. And then in just a brief discussion I had with Joe Riegelsberger, while he has no new numbers in discussions actually I had with you, we would kind of anticipate sources of revenue that we normally depended on for even some of our bonds, money coming from the road fund to pay some road bonds, so on and so forth. I'm not anticipating those numbers to be what we were hoping they would be in the future. So yeah, I want to, if I'm going to be able to help, I want to make sure it goes where it does help a viable business. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Stricula.
So I'll go real quick. I've listened to, I think, all of the conversations. Similar questions seem to keep coming up. You know, we've talked about, I think these are the same questions that have been coming up over the last 4 or 5 meetings. You mentioned a couple of times the speed at which we were trying to get this through and the speed at which we were trying to do something, and it was rushed, if you will. I'll just bring up a point that you wouldn't understand, which is, you know, I'm a veteran. I was in the military. This is how we are taught to make decisions. We're taught to analyze a situation quickly, identify opportunities and alternatives, and then make a decision and move. It wasn't rushed in a unhealthy way, and working with our community partners to try to move forward in tandem, as opposed to stepping through this one step at a time, so we're not 4 weeks into it and still not doing anything. That's the point. That's what we were trying to do. And Mayor, I'll remind you that your position is very ceremonial in nature. You are not the only leader that sits up here, and we don't work for you. I work for the 33,000 residents in the city, and I'm going to do everything in my power to represent them as best as I can. And I'm not going to go through you and ask your permission to talk to the CDC or the chamber or whoever else to try to get something done. Councilmember Bradburn, you talked about finances with the city. We've asked that question multiple times. We heard from our finance director in a memo that you asked for that said us giving $500,000, and it grants like a family making $100,000 a year, giving $1,000 to a charity. We look through these options, right? We've done this. We've been down this road before. We've talked about it over and over again ad nauseum. The same questions that you're asking again today are the same questions you asked 2 weeks ago, a week ago. This is paralysis by analysis. This is it. We need to move forward. We need to move forward for the good of the city. We need to move forward for the good of these small businesses and for the residents. Right? It's time for us to be the leaders that they've asked us to be and make a decision and move. And that's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. Councilmember Honorlaw? Anything?
Oh, I feel like we are just repeating and rehashing what we've already spoke about. I think that there's a minority of council that has one viewpoint on the direction we should go. I don't think they've been able to convince one member of anybody else to their point. I think the rest of us have come up with an idea of a plan that is bigger and could be better that we're not even discussing, and that's ordinance 46. So it's on the agenda tonight. So I think, you know, there's got to be a way we come together, and I think 46 is broad enough and not set in that we could be discussing it. Instead, we're rehashing something that's doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. And other than blaming people or personally attacking people, we're not convincing somebody else of why our idea or our solution to the problem, because we all want to help. We all want to be able to provide a solution the best we can. But we all have different principles that are pushing us on what opens the door and how far we can go on that. And I think that's where we're all stuck.
Okay, I'll wrap this up by reassuring Mr. Stricula that you work for all 33,000 residents. That's true. And I hope that you can learn to work with me and not against me. I am the ceremonial leader of this council. I'm the chair of the meetings. And I'll tell you, it's real tough when you're not treated with respect behind the scenes or in these meetings.
Respect goes both ways, Mayor. Respect goes both ways.
The floor, that's a sign of respect to wait until you get the floor. Okay. If you want to persuade others and try and change their viewpoint, respect and openness is a great way to start. And communicating clearly with your leadership is very helpful. And with that idea of representing all 33,000 residents, that's where this decision gets so tough because we do have a fiduciary obligation to honor all 33,000 residents and our core services responsibilities. And so we want to help this segment of our population that's hurting very much. We've always wanted to do that, but we have to be so, so careful. And then how do we address the needs of those in the rest of our population that aren't involved with small businesses that are hurting? We have job loss. We have kids home from school. We have all kinds of added expenses and financial hardships on all of the 33,000 residents. And so how do we choose one group over another? It's excruciating. This is very difficult. We want to be analytical and careful, and we want to try and make it as fair as we possibly can. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to come to agreement on the original proposal for Ordinance 43, but you know what? We went through the democratic process, and it's time for us to move on. I wish that those who disagreed with my position could have been more fair and civil. I wish that council members hadn't explained to the public that that economic sustainability fund was set aside to use on outside entities and give them the sense that somehow I was criminally withholding it when that's not true. And I wish that we had had a greater sense of civil discourse in all of this. Mr. Hanson, we do need to move on to the community input or public input portion. I don't think we've got the ability to discuss Ordinance 46, which was item 6 that was alluded to by Council Member Honderlaw, but I think we're going to have to save that for the next time so that we can get our 60 minutes of public input in.
Yeah, I have something on 2020-46.
One moment, please. Mr. Hanson, what do you think we should be doing?
Well, your next item after the recognition of the CDC was public input. So once council's done- I'm sorry?
We did, we rearranged. I'm so sorry, I forgot about that. So we are ready for that. We need to go ahead and get that started.
If I could just say one thing real quick. I have some serious concerns about 2020-46, and obviously we do not have enough time to discuss them. I actually called this meeting today for this reason, to talk about 2020-46. I think it's crucial though that obviously our residents who have been waiting have a chance to speak. But the city manager, Eric, if we could please call another work session where we only talk about 2020-46. This is due to be voted on Monday, and I have some serious concerns with this ordinance.
Yeah.
So if we can have another meeting set up before Monday, that would be great.
My original plan with that was to call a work session for this upcoming Monday so that we would have 2 weeks to be researching things that we can do, and our staff has been working. But once again, 3 council members have called another meeting before we could get to that. So if we could wait until at least Monday, which would be our regularly scheduled date, but I would like to call the meeting.
Aren't we voting on it on Monday?
Not necessarily.
Well, yeah, but you do have the ability and you do have the votes. So we are basically voting on it, and it's not going to get a public forum to discuss what exactly is going on with $1.5 million. So I will be calling another work session because I'm not waiting till Monday where you can just pass this and
time to keep, you guys keep calling these meetings and calling these meetings contrary to the spirit of tabling. I'd like to ask council for a motion to, well, we don't even have it on the floor, but I would like to table Ordinance 46 until we can study it through the Economic Development Committee and Finance Committee, and not to bring it back up for review until we are ready to report on that. Is this an appropriate time to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, is there such a motion?
Oh, I was deferring to Jeff.
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Well, if the question is this an appropriate time to introduce a motion to table Ordinance 46? I mean, if that's the question, we haven't reached Ordinance 2020-46 on today's agenda yet. The next item on today's agenda is the public input portion.
So we have a hard stop in 58 minutes. And so I think we just need to,
We'll go ahead and call another meeting. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
we'll do that. That's fine.
okay, I'll get that going. Vice Mayor?
Yes, so while the chamber and CDC are here, I just want to ask, we have 2020-43 that we passed last week, a $160,000 gift card program. We need to get that money out into the community. Can we move forward to put that together and get those dollars out into the community? Certainly interested in doing that. I understand there's a fear about where that leads to, but that is an issue that resource comes back to council. I think we can then decide what do we do with that resource once we have it. But we certainly want to get those gift cards purchased, get that money out in the community. Are you willing to undertake that effort on our behalf?
Without
Well, I'll take a
knowing-
shot at answer it.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say we
No,
don't have any indication at this point how the funds, what the city is going to do with them. Correct? There's no plan other than sitting on them for some period of time.
Completely undefined.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to be harmful to our small businesses. We want to get the dollars out there to them. We just want to be able to marshal that resource and decide what do we do with it once we acquire it. But are you willing to assist us in that effort of getting that money out in the community and having that resource, or are you unwilling to do that? That's really my question.
Can we vote on the fishes and loaves?
Councilmember Chance?
That's what they wanted to do.
Ms. Taylor, what about scheduling a committee meeting? Is there a committee can take this on with the CDC and we can talk about a plan to address the usage of the gift cards and timing of the usage of the gift cards? Because I think there is a great deal of good that can be done with the city in giving those gift cards back to the public or using those gift cards for the public and for our own purposes.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I want to speak for these gentlemen, but I think I will, that I think we probably need to touch base, the four of us, to figure out what, if that is an appropriate next step. So.
Okay, you can do that and get back to us, please. Thank you for coming today. We appreciate you answering our questions and taking more time out of your schedules. We appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Hanson, could you begin the process of?
Yes, if you'll give me maybe 2 minutes, I'm going to move the CDC members back into attendees, and then I'll talk a little bit. Maybe everyone takes a little bit of a break, and before we come back, I'll have a little bit of instructions for those that are attending. So bear with me. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm assuming you have no visitors.
No visitors.
Okay, thanks. Jeff? Can you hear me? Jeff?
Oh,
Forbes.
Jeff.
Yes.
The motion they passed for public input, what, it was 2 minutes.
2 minutes per individual, aggregate of 60 minutes total.
And then council discussion following that.
Correct.
I think we can start, Mayor, if you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. All right, we'll follow your lead, Mr. Henson.
Keep this brief. What we had done, and we provide 2 avenues for public input. One involving folks that may visit the municipal center. None have shown up, so I don't think we need to discuss that, but that was an option. That is why the public podium screen or box is probably on your screen. That is a kind of a de facto another member of our meeting. The other option uses Zoom's webinar function, so we kind of call that the webinar piece. We still have some attendees, and the number there goes back and forth. So now I'd be speaking to those attendees that hopefully can hear me. What council has done is a 2-minute limit per person. So Jennifer will be timing those comments, and once you've reached the 2 minutes, she'll let you know, and then we'll have to mute you or move you off. I don't think we'll need to move anyone out of the meeting. We'll just effectively turn off the microphone. I think that'll be manageable here. But for those members, what it means is if you're interested in speaking, there is a function there in Zoom to raise your hand. So if you can see your name and click on that, as soon as you raise your hand, then we'll move through that list, calling on each of you to speak to council and then move on to the next person in that list. Just a couple of reminders, and as you've probably seen if you've been watching the meeting, you want to make sure and unmute yourself. We can't do that from here, so unmute your button, and so that everyone can hear you. If we don't hear you or don't respond because you've left away, we may move on to the next person in line. And any of you that when you registered to attend this, if you left comments in that section of the registration, following the meeting, I don't know how yet, but there's a way we can run a report. We'll provide any comments that you left to all of council members. So anything you left there will be provided to them, whether you speak or not. I think that covers it. I know the registration form said send questions to my email. I think that's questions about attending the webinar. Those questions aren't something I have or that I would be passing on to council here. But certainly if you have other comments that you're not able to make and you didn't register, you can always email and we make sure and get those on to council. So I think unless council members have any questions, then, and I think Jennifer's prepared to run this. Jennifer, the first gentleman I show is Glenn Garvin. And maybe to help things move them along, following Glenn Garvin, Bamini Patel and Joy Bennett would be next in line, and then we'll go from there. Are you taking care of that, Jennifer?
So Mr. Garvin, you are first to speak. If you want to go ahead and address council. As soon as you start talking, I'll start the 2 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I hope this public commentary allows for some community voices to be heard, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I've been disgusted by the unneeded and petty politics by our city council. This came to light when a small business proposal was stalled, tabled, and delayed by a group of city council members for inexplicable and still unexplained reasons. As you are no doubt aware, I posted some questions on a video of the Mason Deerfield Facebook page that I would like answered. One of those, and this is directed to Mayor Grossman and the council members Honor Law, Gilb, and Bradburn. Are you collaborating and or colluding with each other in a coordinated effort? There is a trail of breadcrumbs that lead to this incredible conclusion. Those include the Gang of Four all writing seemingly coordinated statements that indicated a pre-decision to the special session that then to TJ Honor Law's anxious and premature motion on tabling then on tabling that, and then to Bradburn's future predicting reference to the other council members needing to table. Yeah, let's remember that he had a pre-written statement that miraculously predicted there would be a table motion, which seems impossible for him to know without pre-knowledge. Finally, Vice Mayor Gill presented a hamstrung version of the original proposal in his $160,000 gift card idea. The Gang of Four already seemed well-versed in this proposal, despite no conversation of it in either of the finance meetings. The Gang of Four had few, if any, questions about implementation, logistics, or operational rollouts, and were all ready to vote yes, although they needed more time over a much more detailed ordinance submitted by Josh Stricula. Not only does this group seem to know about this, but they also reference the federal funds being more than enough. Now, 3 or 4 weeks after that, how does that look for small businesses in Mason? It points out how out of touch you are with what is needed and how things are working for our businesses. And Vice Mayor Gilb, you've quoted this many times, yet our businesses struggle with this, and you seem to just be standing there with you and Mayor Grossman saying, let them eat cake from your ivory tower and bully puppets. That's it. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garvin. Next is Mrs. Bahimi Patel. Mrs. Patel, if you want to go ahead and address council.
Hi, thank you for taking my, concern. I own a business. I'm a small business. I own Subway here in Mason. Yes, we definitely need all the help we can get from city, but I also hear a lot of our customers who have lost jobs, and they also need money. This is the taxpayers' money. I would love to have a support and, get some gift card coming in, but I think we need to also consider those people who really, really need money right now. There are a lot of people who have lost their jobs. Their whole family, husband and wife, have lost the jobs. So I think we need to also help them. Yes, small business needs all the help we can get, but if we if we help them, they're going to come back and support the small business.
Mrs. Patel, you're done?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And Sherry, thank you for inviting me.
Next, I have Mr. Randy Stegbauer. Mr. Stegbauer, if you want to go ahead.
Mute. Yes, this is Randy Stegbauer. At about 3:30 today, I joined the Finance Committee meeting and learned that Mason and the CDC still have to agree on how to administer Ordinance 43. In other words, it's up in the air if it will actually be implemented. Why did the council throw away the agreement that the CDC had with the council concerning the original Ordinance 43 when they didn't have a similar agreement in place ahead of time for the amended 43? It's incredulous to me that the person who proposed the amendment to 43 didn't know that there was no agreement with Mason and the CDC a week later. The original 43 could have been helping Mason small businesses for 2 weeks now with $500,000. This week, I heard that the money for the federal SBA program was already used up and went mostly to larger firms. Mason had a chance to show their support for their own local small businesses, but decided to pass a watered-down gift card program that might never be enacted. Gift cards that some small businesses don't use today, and gift cards that might become liabilities in the future. I also heard that the Finance Committee today talked about maybe, say, establishing some service agreements with the third party to possibly use them to help Mason's local small businesses. They acted as if none of the conversations we've had over the past month ever happened. And this is somewhat directed at the mayor, I suppose. If you're hoping that half of the gift cards are forgotten or lost, can Mason buy the gift cards and then just shred them? Likewise, if you believe that $400 isn't enough for each business, then let's increase that amount so that this becomes meaningful. I'm sure that Mason will be okay if we're overly generous.
I believe deep in my heart that if I can help, I should. I know that Mason can help their local small businesses. I don't know if the CARES Act ever will. I'll never understand how the council can sit here and not feel compelled to help.
Mr. Egbauer, your time, your 2 minutes is up. You need to move on to the
Thank you.
next individual. I'm sorry. Next up is Ms. Joy Bennett, and then followed by Mr. Mark Hackey. Ms. Bennett, if you want to address council, please.
Hi, thank you to ICRC-TV and the city staff for making this opportunity possible. I really appreciate it. The first thing I wanted to say is Vice Mayor Guild, you proposed an amendment last week to Ordinance 2020-43 to reduce the amount to $160,000 and invest it in gift cards. But just now, like 20 minutes ago, you asked Sherry Taylor what the actual need is to fill in the gap between the statewide shutdown and receiving CARES Act or other federal funds. So it appears you just pulled the $160,000 number out of the air, which is not well thought out. And yet, I have heard over and over again in all of these meetings, we need to be careful, we need to be thoughtful, we need to take our time, we need to think this through. Why did you rush a half-baked amendment through without any plan in place to execute it? Today, you've spent 90 minutes digging and asking detailed questions about the workings of the Pay It Forward proposal and the Loaves and Fishes proposals. You did not put that kind of rigor towards your own amendment. What are we, the public, to make of that? It smacks of not invented here, which means if it isn't my idea, it's garbage. And that is not what we, the people who voted you all in, are wanting. I want to use the rest of my time to read a few of the thousands of comments that the residents, your constituents, are saying about what we want done with our public funds, what we want you to do. Amanda says, I hope they understand there are voters paying attention. If they can't help lead us through a crisis and protect the small business backbone of our community, they certainly won't get my vote. Even if they disagree with the proposal but had a reasonable discussion, that I would at least have my respect. As it stands, absolutely not. Leah Hobday says this is so embarrassing. Kenna O'Sullivan says, since this is an unprecedented emergency, they should have to work together to come up with a plan or explain why not, instead of having only 4 decide. I also think it's extremely important to get this resolved ASAP since time is up.
Ms. Bennett, my apologies. You've reached the 2-minute allocated time limit. We are going to move on to the next participant. Thanks for your comments. Next up is Mark Hackey. Mr. Hackey, you'll be followed by Kara Spade. Mr. Hackey, if you want to address council.
Great, thank you. It's so hard to know where to start. Every time I watch one of these sessions, I end up with a page full of notes of things that just completely astound me and disappoint me. I want to talk to what Council Member Stricula had spoken to. He mentioned that in the military you have to make decisions quick, but they're not haphazard decisions. They're very sound decisions, and a lot of this comes out of leadership, and that's what we're not seeing here. Leadership's commonly defined as the ability to guide a team toward a common goal. Additionally, good leaders take blame for failures and give credit and praise to the team for its successes. We're not seeing that. We're seeing blame across the board for things that are just ridiculous. You guys have passed legislation without a plan. This is insane. There was a plan. You had a great plan that the CDC presented to you that outlined exactly how this should be done, and it was ignored because you had a better idea. You had a better plan. Well, your plan is nothing. And then now we're looking to get gift cards and return those back to the city. And I just heard you, Mayor Grossman, say, we might even use those gift cards for our own purposes. What in the world is that? That is not doing something responsible for our citizens. That is not doing something responsible for the small businesses in Mason. That is just ridiculous. And lastly, I want to say to your comment about respect, respect is earned. It is not entitled. Thank you very much.
Mr. Aki, thank you for your comments. Next up is Ms. Spaeth, and she will be followed by Mrs. Nelson. Ms. Spaeth, if you want to address council, your 2 minutes will begin.
Thank you very much. I own the Goddard School, which is across the street from 16 Lots. I have no idea how a gift card program would even benefit my school, my business at all. That is my first question, how to benefit somebody that doesn't have any goods, but provides a service to the community that helps prepare young children, their education, to do very well in the Mason City Schools future. That is my biggest question. And also I applied for both the PPPL and the EIDL on April 6th. I got approved for the PPPL on April 14th. I still have not received my closing loans, yet I continue to pay my teachers full salary because I cannot, when we go back to school, whenever our mandate is over, I cannot have my teachers there with the kids. They need those teachers to see those faces, those familiar faces. They've been with their parents and this is so unreal for all those kids. They need their routine. They don't have that right now. So I've got to continue to pay my teachers. So I don't have any idea how that gift card program would help me at all. And as you see, I don't have any additional funding right now because I am not charging tuition for my parents either, because I don't think that's fair to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spaeth. Next up is Ms. Janet Day Nelson. Ms. Nelson, if you'd like to address council, your 2 minutes will begin.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you for allowing community feedback at this meeting. I did make some notes. Council members, certain council members keep referring to city money. I just want to point out that city money is tax dollars paid by small businesses. Why are other cities able to provide grants to small businesses and Mason is not able to do that? I think that's very sad. Small businesses do not need more loans to repay. So if your ordinance 46 entails loans, that is not the right step. As far as ordinance 43, why did funding go from 500,000 now to 160,000 when it was said you wanted to have a bigger and better plan? We went to less funding, which is not bigger and better. And also gift cards. Not all businesses use gift cards. There's also an abundance of gift cards out there right now with Comet Carryout and the Gifty Nifty program. So I don't see how gift cards are the right answer either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. That concludes our visitors to the council meeting who had wished to speak or address council.
Jennifer, there's more that have joined, so it may be worth, if anyone else would like to speak that has joined, you need to indicate by pressing the raise hand. I don't see anyone new that is indicating that, so. Unless council would like that, there are still attendees there. If council would like to continue, extend, or end the public input.
I'm good at extending it.
There is one, it appears that Joy Bennett, her hand is still raised. Ms. Bennett, it appears you may have 2 more minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to continue reading comments. Jamie Nelson asked, what's a logical reason for not even wanting to discuss whether the city of Mason could support small businesses during this time? Of course, we've gotten no response from you all. But Courtney Tong suggested perhaps one logical reason is if the issue is brought back on the table for discussion, council members may eventually have to vote on the issue, and the group of 4 would have to go on record as voting no. Whereas by tabling the issue indefinitely, they can claim they're continuing to assess the proposal or that they need more time, never having to actually record a vote. Leah Gibson Edwards says, I'm tired of council members who claim to be in it because they love their community, but do not support local businesses. I know my votes will go a completely different direction next election. Stand up for Mason or move along so we can vote in someone who does. Jen Dwyer says, my parents have owned their own small business for 30 plus years. 10 or more of those years, they have been operating their business in Mason. This is absolutely appalling to me. To have the means to help your small businesses and just hang them out to dry along with the employees that work there is wrong in so many ways. John Prudzinski says, I'm very disappointed in the behavior of these four, and especially the mayor. I can't understand why they would not want to help the businesses, their neighbors, and the town through all of this. What will other businesses think when making a decision about where to hang their sign? I will definitely remember this at the voting booth. Nicola Parati says, what our mayor and her group don't seem to understand is only essential people are working. Many families in our community, including these small businesses, are hurting. Those gift cards might help them pay this month, next month's bills, but when they're redeemed, those businesses won't make the revenue needed for supplies when they do reopen. Our tax dollars should be used in a crisis situation. That is why we all pay taxes, except for TJ, of course, federally, state, or city, to be able to help our communities sustain and grow. I really hope people are paying attention to this disgusting display unfolding. I have never been so embarrassed by leadership, and that's saying a lot since I have worked for the federal government for the last 19 years. Kathy Popovich says there's only 3 who are acting in good faith in support of our local Mason business owners, who are a vital part of our fabric of our community.
I'm sorry, your additional 2 minutes have run out, and we've got a couple other visitors that wish to speak to address council once again. So we are going to move on. Mr. Mark Hackey, who spoke previously, would like another opportunity to speak. Mr. Hackey, if you would like to address council, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of additional points I wanted to make. There's been a lot of talk about how this has come about and how, there's possibly a handout or whatever you want to call it. These are unprecedented times. We have never seen anything like this before. So to say that, it's not an appropriate use of money, or to try and paint this in anything other than a necessary step to help these businesses is just, it's incorrect. Councilmember Bradburn mentioned, maybe these businesses aren't viable. Well, they were viable. The fact is, no person goes into business. I own my own business. I have a disaster recovery plan. My plan does not account for going from whatever I'm earning today to zero. I never anticipate going to zero. I may lose business, but I will never anticipate going to zero. So it's just unprecedented. So for us to look at anything other than needing to do the right thing for these businesses is just wrong. Lastly, I've just got one quick question for Mr. Honerlaw. On March 30th, you stated publicly in a meeting that you would not be in favor of a gift card program. You said it's not the right way for this to be done. I would like to see you address how you go from not being in favor of it to being in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hackey. Next up, we have Mr. Stegbauer, who addressed council previously. He would like another opportunity to address council. Mr. Stegbauer, if you would like to go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to finish up very quickly. I'll never understand how the council can sit here and not feel compelled to help now. We don't need to recoup any of this money. It's more important to help these businesses now. We don't have time. We don't have time to move slowly and carefully. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Mr. Stegbauer. Again, I don't have any indication from anybody else that they wish to address council at this time.
Shall we move on then and go on into outstanding business? How are we doing on time? 6 o'clock. So that gives us 27 minutes divided by 7. So how about maybe 3 minutes each? Could we try that? And we'll get through this to the best of our ability. Are there any council members that would like to respond to the public input? Councilmember Honderlaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I was asked how I could go from being and commenting against the gift card versus voting for it. And I think Councilmember Nelson did the exact same thing. We both said that was not the perfect solution. But when you're working with a group of 7 that are on different sides of the aisle, you try to find compromise. That was my vote for that. This is not, it was a first step. We were trying to get something, a first step, something that would happen immediately, something that would get hands in quickly while we tried to figure out 46 which was going to be the 1.5 million that was going to then reach out past that. And so I justified it that way. Like I said, we're all trying to help businesses. We all want to see something happen immediately and as quickly as possible. I thought this was a good solution considering we were at such different odds and couldn't meet in the middle. I thought this was meeting in the middle, and I think we voted unanimously on it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to respond. I think it was Joy Bennett that said that the $160,000 was just pulled out of the air without any analysis, but I think we explained that amount. So as I understood, the Hamilton program was $300,000, and we asked, how big is the population of Hamilton? It was 62,000 people, and then we looked at Mason as 32,000 people, and made that adjustment to say, okay, let's do the same thing Hamilton did on a pro rata, on a per person basis, and that's certainly how we. So it wasn't just pulled out of the air. It was, how big are we compared to how big is Hamilton? What's the Hamilton program? Let's do something similar to what they did. And again, it was just a first step to try to inject some dollars into the community. I've heard some comments generally, and I just want to clarify that I think there was some misleading in terms of where the Pay It Forward program was going. And the concern with that was that it's public dollars. I believe, I have a philosophy that if we're going to use public dollars, that there needs to be a resource acquired in exchange for that public. I don't think we should just give those dollars away to a private entity that they control those dollars into the future. That's just something that, if, as I sit here protecting the 33,000 people that I represent, I think they're saying to me, run the city, run it appropriately, utilize public resources for public good, and do good in the community. So that, I think the program sound, on the front side, it's getting dollars out, but as the money was coming back, it wasn't coming back to the city, it was coming back to a private entity. And that certainly concerns me as an elected official, looking at how do I protect city resources. And so certainly I've made that position clear, I think a couple of times, that from a conservative perspective, I am conservative. We certainly need to be concerned about protecting city resources, and we certainly need to be concerned about keeping the city moving forward and providing the essential services that the city has to provide. I don't think we've seen the end of this. I certainly want to say that the Federal CARES Act, again, is providing much more resources than we could ever hope to provide. And I am hopeful that people were not discouraged from things that were happening here from applying under those programs for assistance they could get. I'm glad to hear that the Goddard School applied. They were awarded. they're waiting their funding. Certainly then the question is, how do we help until that funding gets into place? Because certainly the dollars we have to help with are not going to be anywhere near meeting the needs that are out in the community. But we need to continue to work on how we can be of assistance to people until that federal dollars gets into their hands. And I'm certainly interested in doing that. I brought up in the Finance Committee this afternoon the idea of a tax refund advance program, giving $2,500 now to those businesses that may need it. That is an advance against their 2020 income tax that may be due next year, and giving them again that local injection now and an opportunity to get back into the normalcy, whatever that's going, what the new normal is going to look like, who knows? But when we get back, then we can figure out how to repay that obligation. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councilmember Chance, sorry. Go ahead.
And I don't, I think I share the sentiment of someone that made some public comments. I don't know where to start. Besides, TJ, you brought up sides of the aisle. No, I don't know how that is referenced here inside this council. Besides, if I look at it, it's people that are listening to our community and people that are playing politics. That's the two aisles I see. So thank you for pointing that out. Secondly, I'm astounded by we continuously are so arrogant on this council that we think we know the plans better than a chamber or whatever we want to call that third party. I am completely I think it's abhorrent. I think it is absolutely crazy that we continue to take that position. And on top of it, we say, hey, let's see what the feds are going to do. Do you guys not read? Do you guys not see what's going on in the news? Have you not heard from our constituents? Have you not seen that 6% went to businesses that with 50 employees or less? Did you not just hear some of the public input? Have you not seen any of the social media? I mean, come on, folks. I mean, this is the problem with government. We talk like we want limited government, we want small government. Well, I 100% agree with you. When we find a good partner that puts together a plan that pivots and we ask them to go through this dance, and I apologize again to them about that because I just don't, you guys never had any intentions of paying any. I think you never wanted to even look at their plan because there is dissension there. And I don't know why. Someone brought it up again.
And ask you to.
You said duplicity, that's dissension. So I'm just going to say this again. I think you guys heard what I asked Sherry. I asked Sherry plenty of time. I said, is there an application? Yes. Is there a selection committee? Yes. Is there a way that they can apply? Yes. Can we get these funds distributed fast? Yes. And so what do? Vice Mayor Gill comes up with a tax refund thing. That's brilliant. I mean, show me anywhere that has that mechanism that can work. You guys are just stalling. And then Councilmember Honeywell, I just don't know what you want.
You're out of order.
I'm not out of order. I'm giving my opinion.
Out of order.
I'm not out of order. You guys can sit there and say whatever you want to. I am sick and tired of it. That's what I am. I'm sick and tired of what you guys are doing. And so again, you guys asked for an apology last weekend, and I will do it again. I'm going to apologize to our small businesses in our community because we are absolutely the laughing stock because some people want to play politics, and you guys know exactly who you are. I'm done.
Thank you. All right. And you were out of order, but we'll go over that later. Okay. Is there anyone else?
I'm not out of order, Mayor. You can have your opinion all you want.
Anyone else? Okay, I will take just a moment. I'll try to stick to 3 minutes. Hold on. Okay. This whole problem is so overwhelming and the magnitude is so profound and so great that we can't begin to solve all of the problems, and our hearts do break for those businesses, especially, and those individuals, people who have lost their jobs. And we have to take time to explore, and we can't know the answers if we don't ask the questions. To the point about a tax incentive or a tax advance, we can't know until we ask. And so we're working on things, we're doing our best, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about for that. Mr. Garvin asked about collaborating and a trail of breadcrumbs and different things like that. Of course, we should be collaborating, but I thought that might be a good question in just a moment to refer to Jeff about what we're allowed to do when we're not in an open meeting. I'm skimming my notes. There's just so much, it's hard to respond to everything. All I can say is in good faith, we've been working. We've had a disagreement on how and how much. In 6 months or so, we're gonna feel the magnitude of the impact on the city of Mason. And so it's incumbent upon us to be careful about how we spend funds now, because we really don't know the total impact. We got a memo from our our finance director that compared what's going on now to the recession in 2008 to 2010. This turned out to be very, very different. So rushing into something is, in my view, not wise. And not being able to meet the needs of everyone is very overwhelming. I wish that we could. To Mrs. Patel's comments, it would be so nice if we could give everyone money so that they could be spending money on these small businesses, but we just can't. There are limits to what we can do with public funds. But to address some of the concerns, Mr. Garvin talked about his videos and his analysis of our meetings, and he said something about eating cake from an ivory tower and some different things. But about collaborating and collusion, Mr. Garvin has even gone so far as to comment on my lipstick and ask whether or not I've been colluding in the bathroom during my restroom break, which is most unfortunate, Mr. Garvin. Your deductive reasoning skills leave a bit to be desired. This is my workplace, and it would be nice for you to learn how to treat a lady in the workplace. I can collaborate with my colleagues, and I don't do that when I'm in the bathroom, just so you know. And I'd like for our law director to just address, in general, generally speaking, what's allowed when we're not in open session? And that's perfect timing. I'm at 3 minutes.
Sorry, couldn't find the button to unmute. If I understand what you're asking, I guess I would say in general, what the Open Meeting Act requires is that meetings of a public body be open to the public. And a meeting is defined as has 3 components: has to be prearranged, has to be discussion of the public business, and it has to be by a majority of the members of that public body. So in the case of a city council of 7 members, anytime there's a prearranged discussion by 4 members, that would constitute a meeting, and it would have to be open to the public. And if it wasn't, that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And that same rule applies to committees. Any public body, whether it's the council as a whole or any committee, it takes a majority of the members.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to comment? We're at 6:17, Councilmember Nelson.
I just want to apologize to our residents and our business owners. We've tried really, really hard to get you funding. I think that the majority of Mason, just from being stopped on the streets when I'm walking, Facebook messages, emails, we know that the residents want their tax dollars to go to you. We're trying to get it to you. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I do apologize. Being the chair of the finance committee, Mason is very wealthy. We're a very fortunate city. We don't have half of the problems that the remainder of the cities do. We're very blessed. With that being said, in an analysis of the financials, we're still going to have a surplus. And on top of the surplus that we're going to have, we have that $3 million set aside which can be used for small businesses, as well as, of course, city services if needed. But being that I believe we're already going to be at a surplus and we have the 3,500,000 is really nothing. So the fact that we're not distributing it out is sad. I would like to move forward, and we waste so much time. I'm almost a little embarrassed to be part of this council. I'm the chief financial officer of a gentleman who owns 5 companies, and I've never ever experienced such delays and chaos in meetings. I would like to just move forward and be productive in what we do, and we haven't shown that. And like I said, it's a little embarrassing actually, but we're gonna keep trying for the small businesses, and that's all I can really say. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Stricula.
I just have a couple of comments. One, Councilmember Arnold, I appreciate your explanation for changing from, because I think we can change our minds, about certain things, and we can over time. But your reasoning was that you wanted to move quickly, but you voted to table 43 twice. So I don't necessarily buy that as a good example. Vice Mayor Gilb, you talked about the rationale with the city of Hamilton and how it came about from that 160,000, their 300,000. But if you look at the tax revenue for the city of Hamilton is 28 million for 2019. I think ours was around or over 40 million. So maybe a step further we actually probably would have taken that 300,000 and pushed it up. Which brings me to the other point, Mayor, you mentioned that, hey, you're worried about the money, our financial situation for the city, right? But we haven't talked about it tonight, but 46 has 1.5 million. So I'm anxious to hear your reasoning as to why 1.5 million is okay. And I'm sure you've been playing that for a long time. And talking about the collaboration that you mentioned, I wish you would have collaborated with me a little bit, because maybe we could have gotten something done a little bit better. Maybe you could have worked with me a little bit from the beginning, as opposed to stopping me and stifling me from the get-go. Vice Mayor Gill, you did mention you're concerned about, and I think it's a valid point, and I talked about it a couple of times in the early meetings, there seems to be a misconception that if we do this, we are discouraging the businesses from applying for the federal loans. Again, that's never been the intent, nor is it supposed to be, right? So the community, and I've said this a lot in private conversations, but the community is on fire, right? Just like the entire world is on fire. The federal government, the state government, other businesses, churches, everybody's grabbed that bucket of water and they're running to put that fire out. We need to grab our bucket of water and run to put that fire out, right? We're not saying that they shouldn't go to these federal places at all. Nobody's discouraging them from doing that. We've heard politics brought into this a lot tonight, because I've heard the term conservative, implying that those that want this to go through wouldn't be conservative. Other side of the aisle was mentioned. Gosh, I'll make the same comment I did on that very first meeting. Like, if we could take the politics out of it for a minute, maybe take our political agendas out of it, maybe we might be able to get something done. Maybe we might be able to move forward a little bit. And yes, you mentioned, Vice Mayor Gilman, I thought that was an interesting piece in the finance meeting about the early tax refund or rebate or something along those lines. There's going to be a lot of work that has to be done on that side, from what I heard from the finance committee, to even see if that's legal or even possible. It is a creative way to look at it. I'm anxious to see. And again, this was not meant to be the only piece that we could do, right? This was that stepping stone, and it's unfortunate that's completely fallen apart and been amended to something that's barely even executable. Thank you.
Okay, did everyone have a turn? Councilmember Hunterlaw.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember, well, I should just address, in case it's not clear, I tabled the original 43 twice because I couldn't get there, and I didn't hear my arguments or my issues about it resolved. So then it got revised, and then I voted for it. So they were two different ordinances really under the same. So, I mean, that's why I was trying to, as it kept getting something that I couldn't get my hands wrapped around, basically shoved down my throat and I was gagging on, I was at least saying, well, here's something we can at least take a bite of together. And that's why I voted for that. And I don't know who the 3 members were that then voted to on the ordinance 46, which basically has got, we waited on the second reading. You guys voted to do that. That's a delay tactic. When we could be talking about something to get something else passed, and now who's playing politics by delaying it? So, I mean, I think you can look at that, and I think people can see how that's being played now.
I tend to look at politics as different from public policy. So yes, I'm a conservative, I admit that. And I tend to look at things through that lens, and spending public money with a public purpose in mind, and purpose meaning that the public has control over it and can consume it, hopefully as equitably as possible. Politics, when I think of politics, I don't think of Democrat or Republican so much as all that ugly stuff that can go on and all of that maneuvering. And there certainly has been a lot of that. And I'm not sure who was referred to as playing politics, but I want to give you a little quote about gaming. It's from Shakespeare. When lenity and cruelty play for a kingdom, the gentler gamester is the soonest winner. Playing gentle takes more time. Playing rougher can be fast, but it creates a lot more problems. The soonest winner will be the gentler gamester, or gamer if you're in modern times. And I just wanted to clarify one more thing before we adjourn. I may have not been very clear about something I paraphrased from Mr. Garvin. He said something like this: she came back from her restroom break with lips loaded and a game plan. Was she colluding with her colleagues during her restroom break in one of the meetings? So I just wanted to make that clear. That is a lot of the public commentary that I've been experiencing on social media. And I think a lot of it has been magnified because of misinformation coming from council members, or just cruelty in playing for the accomplishment that you want. And so I hope that moving forward, civility and lenity and grace and mercy will be part of our game plan. And I think we'll all win that way. And with that, I would ask council for a motion to adjourn, please. Is there someone who could make a motion to adjourn?
Councilmember Nelson.
Can I make a comment, please? We still have 5 minutes.
Oh, I didn't see you. Yes, you may make a comment, and then I'll ask for that motion to adjourn.
I just want to clarify, I'm not quite sure, Councilmember Honerlaw, what you were talking about when you said we're playing politics now. There's a $1.5 million expenditure on the table with zero detail and zero information. How in the world can we ever even consider passing that without knowing what are we spending $1.5 million on? So this is not playing politics and trying to stall it. This is crazy in my eyes. Who proposes an ordinance with no details behind it? Just a blank check for 1.5 million, do whatever you want with it. That's crazy, absolutely crazy. And I want to know exactly what we're doing and why it was proposed that way, because to me, it looks like something fishy is going on there. So I'm not playing politics. I want to know the details if we're going to spend $1.5 million.
It won't be a blank check, and we will talk more about that later. Is there a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make that motion.
Something. We still have 3 minutes.
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
There you go again. Good job.
You know the rule on that.
Testicular.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gelb.
Yes.
Councilmember Hunterlaw.
Yes.
Mayor Grossman.
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson.
No, we still have a council member wanting to speak, so I think it's disrespectful.
Councilmember Chance.
No, I had a 15-second.
Councilmember Bradburn.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes, and we are adjourned.